Oh. Hey, brother. So I'm here to have a wonderful conversation with our good friend Bryce. I'm sorry, our good friend Vu. I must be tired. Our good friend Vu, who's been following the Yamen protocol for approximately 4 to 5 years. And I'm really interested to ask him where he gets his protein from. I'm really interested to ask him about a few things, one of them being caloric restriction and his personal experience with it. Many of us Ammonites, you see, even though there are these general principles, we tend to follow them differently, and we've had different experiences with them. So I'm particularly interested to know about Vu's experience and just his personal life, really, because he's a friend of mine, and that would excite me. And I'm very excited to just have him pop in whenever he's ready. So I I'm just gonna wait here. I'm just gonna wait here, and you guys could tune in. The rest of you can just tune in. Tune in. I'll share some of the ideas that I'm thinking. I'm getting an image of space, giving space to allow input to really come in. So that's what I'm gonna do now. I'm just gonna meditate.
Brother,
Brother, good rising.
pleasure to be here.
I'm glad. I'm glad to see you. You look very good with your hair styled that way. It's
It's a
just now gotten
change.
long enough, huh?
Hey?
It's just now gotten long enough, huh?
Yeah. It was at a frustrating point in time when it was just in between. So I don't know if you've ever grown your hair out before, but I did a few years ago and I just lost the patience for it.
Yeah.
So this time I told myself that it'll be a practice of patience. So that's sort of my challenge.
I like it. I like it. For me, I decided that I would either do that or I would just completely continue to shave it. Both are pretty good practices of patience, I feel. So I
Indeed,
think this
whatever
is
floats your boat.
I think this is really good alchemy here because me and you are different in a lot of ways, and yet we follow the same protocol, which is just a set of principles. So I think that's just going to naturally be very valuable. And I think this is sort of what I'm getting in the image in my mind now. I'll tell you in a second. So I know you're really informed on nitty-gritty details that I may not be. And I also have really liked your posts over the years. And I think I'm really good at macro in a sense where I can take certain ideas that are really just disparate and I can sort of engineer them and bring them together. So I just have general places where I want to take us and have you just share your leadership and your masculinity there. Those have that, what would you say, the polarity. So, and I've been learning some really interesting science lately about system science. which is a science based on the general principles that all systems operate on, as above, so below. And I was even engineering this conversation in a sense, just in the sense of where the general places a conversation could go. In Raja Yoga, I remember mentioning to you how there are 5 primary things that people tend to go over in their minds. So what's really cool is me and you are naturally Ghani yogas in that way. And I'll explain what that is. So there are 4 primary types of yoga. There's Raja Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Kriya Yoga, and what's the 4th now? Bhakti, Kriya, Raja, Bhakti, Kriya, Raja, Karma. Excellent. So what's really good about the protocol is it does bring all 4 together, which I've learned over time. But there's a really beautiful emphasis on the Raja Yoga element in my experience. And the Raja Yoga essentially is what becomes the Ghana Yoga. So Bhakti is the form, is the yoga of love or devotion. And these people, they naturally lean towards, for example, we might often see them in churches and they're clearly having some sort of experience, but they can't explain. And then we come across Raja yogis, which they become Ghani yogis, and they're excellent explainers. And then we have Karma yogis, who they are action, action, action. And they believe everyone's just weaving together nonsense with philosophies. And then you have Kriya yogis, which just believe everything's energy. And these 4 come together clearly in what we practice. And there seems to be a really beautiful emphasis on, I love the background, by the way. Is that your porch?
It is, yeah.
I
That's where
love
our dogs run around.
I love the emphasis of the Raja Yogi, because the Raja Yogi becomes the Ghani Yogi. The Ghani Yogi is a rare path because it's the path of knowledge. Now, the only way someone becomes the path of knowledge is they have to center themselves in their true selves first. So most people can't even understand the literature of a Raja Yogi, of a Ghani Yogi, sorry, until they've anchored themselves, anchored themselves into the true self, into the true being. And being that me and you naturally lean on, Ghani Yogi, this interests me too in our dynamics. And so the first question, and feel free to answer this however you want, and I'll just weave together as we're going along. Where do you get your protein from?
That's great. Oh man. Well, firstly, food is a good place to get it from.
It is, right?
But
Because I've seen
I guess to delve into this. Yeah, go on.
I've seen a post of yours that I wanted to get a little bit more info on. The differences between whey and soy. And I'm familiar that soy in particular, in the bro science community, that's what I'll call it. They're very concerned about the estrogen or the phytoestrogen. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I do. And that's all it is. It is phytoestrogen, is in that it mimics, I guess, or it looks like estrogen, but then it acts totally differently. And there's research even showing that there is, I guess, protective properties with the phytoestrogens. So I guess just because it looks like something doesn't necessarily mean it sort of behaves like something. And coming from a plant source, phyto, meaning plants, it's totally different in terms of how that acts upon the body compared to like mammal estrogen or mammal secretion that you will get from that. And anecdotally, like I haven't felt any sort of difference consuming the amount of soy I have or introducing soy into my diet. So I think a lot of this is very, I guess, fear driven and very, I guess,
approach sort of driven, right?
yeah. And it's there's always things to demonize, and it's cool to demonize on soy boys who are, I guess, more.
Yeah.
Um,
I think next podcast would just focus on soy, and I'll have you do the podcast with your shirt off, just so people can.
Actually, I'm wearing a shirt that says
No,
"No
oh,
way."
that's beautiful. Yes, yes. So
And yeah, just I guess to sum it up, I don't think there's anything to be fearful
yeah,
of. Like the research that shows that I guess soy, when it becomes like detrimental, is beyond what the normal human can consume.
yeah.
So like
I
it's
can
just there's
actually
no.
add a little bit to that. You're familiar with the China study?
Yes.
Wonderful. Maybe you're even the person who put me onto this. I'm not sure. It's a beautiful audiobook. I've heard it twice so far. And what I was learning is that protein consumption, particularly from animal sources, seems to have a very detrimental effect, particularly over time. And there are short-term studies which we can, there's the reductionist approach with these short-term studies on the Atkins diet, high fat, high protein. But then if you actually extend these studies, they don't have good effects on people. And one of the things that they noticed was that when they were giving people plant-sourced protein, particularly with protein that had, cysteine, which is available inside of dairy products like milk and cheese, that, these animals in the studies developed cancerous properties. And that an interesting thing happened when they gave them protein restriction, which was simply by lowering the protein amount, the cancer, it almost shut off the cancer gene inside of the experience of these rats, which is pretty fascinating to me. And what's also different about this was with the animal protein, but they were able to give really high amounts of the soy protein, and it just didn't have that effect, cancerous or otherwise. So that's also a really interesting dynamic, in my opinion, too. There seems to be like this heavy emphasis on the West, and I can't tell you where it came from. I know who perpetuates it, on animal-based proteins and animal-based. Meanwhile, I've read evolutionary nutrition. I know that we're naturally fruit eaters, frugivores. And what makes our diet different, mine and yours, I think I could paint a quick little picture, which would be nice. Um, so we're naturally frugivores for millions of years, millions upon millions of years. And it's also one of the reasons why we're more intelligent than many other animals, because we have to remember where the fruit trees are, and it's sort of a mapping sort of relationship. Now, something happened which is interesting, which the doctor talks about often, and it's one of the primary tenets, which I'm going to ask your personal experience on, which is caloric restriction in a bit. And the trees essentially became a lot less available, a lot less available. And in this process of these trees becoming so much less available, we had to experiment with different forms of food. And nutrient-dense foods became really important to us. And so things like tubers, grains, etc., these foods which have a relationship to mucus, in a sense where fruits don't produce mucus in the body, but these foods do. So this was my journey a little bit with this, because I came at it from the species-specific diet before I came across the doctor. And yet it's sort of, you have to look at it in a system, because we're eating once a day. It's an hour interval, and it's a nutrient dense meal, and it's also calorically restricted. And the other properties of this too, our exercise regime and how we're able to metabolize and eliminate these extra, what would you say, these extra toxins in the body much more effectively than would be otherwise. And we get some added benefits too that we wouldn't get if we were just eating the fruit diet. For example, we fast for longer hours, which is more directly associated to longer lifespan. And to the extent that these animals and bugs and all sorts of other things were able to restrict food, they live to that extent longer. So that's something I know you're very familiar with. So there's some interesting benefits that we get out of choosing these specific foods, these nutrient dense foods. And so coming from the evolutionary perspective, for a long time, we were fruit eaters. And what we would have to get the same amount of nutrients, we would have to eat several times a day. And what we're doing is through nutraceutical agents, which affect AGEs, advanced glycation enzymes in the body, we're able to get in much more nutrients, inhibit calories, and balance out blood sugar over time by adapting the nervous system and other parts of the body. I don't know if you have something to say on this, but I think that this is a really beautiful picture, being painted so far. I'm curious about your experience with caloric restriction and sort of how that feels in your body, because I'm sure during the beginning, maybe it wasn't the same. And so I'm curious how this has affected you and your experience, your structure, and how you've experienced the diet, because I'm sure it's very easy now. And I'm sure you've also come at it from a different angle than I have, because we all have different experiences, Ammonites. So
yeah, it's it's definitely been a roller coaster, if I want to
and how
put
long
it
have you practiced? Was it 4
simply
years?
that way. It would have been, I would say, 4 to 5 years now. So that's sort of the time frame. And it's been definitely a learning experience with I guess knowing your body, and also knowing, I guess, when you can push it, when you can stretch it, and when to sort of sit back a bit, and also modulating the amount of activity that you're doing as well, because that also has a big impact at the end of the day with your energy expenditure and how much you're taking in. So it's all really fine tuning everything, and that's something that you can't do, in a short term. It takes time, and it takes time to understand and know your body. And yeah, it's something that at the start, like I was and even throughout was very obsessive about, I guess, in terms of meeting all my nutrient, macro and micronutrient requirements, entering everything into chronometer, and I guess have a little celebratory day when I hit all my sort of my macros, micros, and calories, so to speak. And over time, you sort of really learn to tune in, and I guess understand where your body is at, and certain days, because with calorie restriction, like when I was actually monitoring it very closely, there is days when I guess eating the same amount of calories was not enough, or eating the same amount of calories was too much, whereas I was forcing myself to eat the additional, so I hit that sort of requirement. And that sort of goes to show, and got me to understand that even though you're the same Vu, but you're different Vu each day, right? And your body's requirements based on stress, based on external factors, based on your sleep, based on your level of recuperation, based on how much, I guess, muscle that you have to repair. Your requirements each day is going to be slightly different. So over time with that, I've really taken intuitive approach, and I've even monitored that intuitive approach just to see where I'm sitting at. And over time, it's roughly 20-25% restriction based on I guess what I would be from the very start. So intuitively, my body won't want to eat as much as it would normally. And so over time, after monitoring for a while now, I intuitively just eat less. And so I guess I sort of get out of the point now where I'm less orthorexic about like monitoring every meal, which I was doing for a while, like a good, a
Yeah.
year, 2 years or so. And after a while, you just understand your body, and you know that, yes, each day, this is how full I get, or this is how I feel, and this is roughly around 1,800 calories or so, and you just know. And then after a while, you speak to a lot of people who's been doing it for a long time, and they can tell you that intuitively, like, what they feel is pretty much right on point in terms of what their body is consuming.
What are your
So
yeah?
yeah.
What are some of your favorite meals? Because you're totally a chef, so.
Well, my favorite meals could be different to, I guess, to other people, but what I really take joy and pride in is finding a simple meal and
And you
making
have
it
beautiful
delicious.
recipes. I really appreciate that about you because you've probably seen so many of my dishes. They're hyper simple, and I just mesh it together, so to speak. And I just intuit it
But
as
you
I'm.
enjoy that, right?
Hmm?
But you enjoy that, right?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I love it. Sometimes
Yeah.
I'll take a note from you and I'll make specific meals. And for example, you gave me a good idea. You mentioned something African peanut stew, and I maybe
Mm,
it probably was you. And I just tried something similar to that, chickpeas with peanut butter, and it was quite delicious actually. And I've mixed
nice.
it as well with yuca, for example. So
Awesome.
I'm sure that you have like a favorite recipe.
Yeah, I have a few favorite go-to meals. I sort of have like a rough guideline in terms of what I want to include each week and what I sort of feel best on. And there's always some variations of beans and rice or beans and sourdough. And, one of my passions is to uncover, you know, traditional recipes from different cultures, because every culture has some sort of legume history, if you want to call it that. And I find that fascinating because through famine and poverty, and through suppression, these are the energy and calorie dense sort of food that people would survive on. And so hence, if you just eat a plain bean, it's so boring and flavorless. So these different cultures would have to find ways to spice it up, so to speak, make it interesting.
Mhm.
And from what I've uncovered so far, each different culture, from Indian to Greek to Albanian, um, to like the South Africans, to the Mexicans, they all have different ways that they do their beans, and it fascinates me because it tastes so different and can really transform a dish. So for me, on a broad, each week, I would try to include some sort of variation of beans. And there's always some sort of tofu in there as well, because we really enjoy tofu. And every now and then we try to put in some lentils as well and chickpeas, just for some variation. So it's pretty interesting. Like I just go with whatever inspires me, but I try to include those staples because I know that, I guess, that diversity is important, not just for us to be continuously interested in and enjoy our food, but also like the diversity of our microbiome, which I'm learning more and more is super important for our health and well-being.
Excellent. And what's cool about most of those recipes that we would find or uncover is that they are 99% vegetarian. So it kind of alludes to some history, even if someone hadn't, made the investigation as to where we come from and what we natural our species specific diet is. I've seen I've seen beautiful bins of
Yeah,
yours, cannellini beans being one of your favorites, right?
indeed. Yeah, cannellini beans, red kidney beans are definitely my top two favorite beans. Then it's probably black beans,
I
chickpeas
love
are quite up there as well. Exert a different flavor, different, I guess, texture. But like, honestly, I just think like this is such a hack. And I say to people all the time, jokingly, I'm like, like, honestly, you know how much money we save with like the amount of food that we eat, and
Yeah.
and like the dried produce and sort of stuff, like the dried beans and rice, like it's very economical. Like
Yeah.
if there's nothing else, like if you want to eat an economical diet and still thrive, like beans and rice, legumes and rice, lentils and rice, like it's awesome.
There's so much variety too. Just some of the foods that I really like. And I guess right now I'm feeling called to talk about foods because that excites you, and you being excited excites me. So one of the things that I really liked is yuca. Have you tried yuca? Cassava?
Like, yes, yes,
Yes, wonderful.
yeah. There's actually a cafe that's near our home. They used to serve these cassava chips, and it was like sort of like African spiced, and
Yeah.
also it was a bit sweet because it was sort of glazed with I believe some maple syrup.
Mm.
And I was shattered because they took it off their menu, and it was one of those indulgence things that I would really enjoy, and I felt like my body really craved. So recently, yeah, they took that off the menu, so I'm a bit shattered. But yeah, I love tubers. Like it's, yeah, like my body craves it from time to time.
Yeah.
And I just cook up some tubers, like boil it or steam it, and then just eat it
Yes.
with my meal.
Yes, I really like just how nutrient dense they are, particularly with peanuts. For some reason, and that's something about the combination I seem to really enjoy. I remember that you were really interested in, and perhaps still are. Um, you had this idea for a restaurant.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Is that something that you still like? I mean, I'm sure
Uh,
you have all the experience. You're doing it at home in a very economic, just because this is our lifestyle, right? So
yeah, yeah. Well, it's something that it was, in an innate joy of mine, and it's something that, when you really question yourself, it's like, what do I do that brings joy to the world?
mm,
And I really trying to pinpoint it down. I really had some time to really think about it, and I thought about it, and it was through food, it was through cooking. And it was really an interesting story because obviously coming from, traditionally a Vietnamese background, and once sort of I went vegan, there was a lot of traditional foods that were missing, that brought me back fond memories.
mm,
That, I remember going to, I guess, the noodle shop with my parents on the weekend on a Sunday, sitting down as a family and just enjoying some Vietnamese rice noodles in like this deliciously spiced broth, which we called pho. And those memories just, it was because I've gone sort of plant-based, wasn't able to have that experience anymore. So that really urged me to want to try to relive that, because it's things that, that's really
so
sentimental, and
what
time
was
with
the name?
family. Pho.
Pho. Cool. And
Yeah.
what was the primary like meat associated to that?
Oh, you can go crazy. Like you can get like beef slices, you can get like tendons, you can get tendon balls.
Interesting.
You
I
can get
thought that most of Vietnamese dishes were vegetarian. Am I wrong?
not necessarily. No,
Okay.
there's a small portion of people in Vietnam who are Buddhist, and they practice vegetarianism,
Mm,
but I guess there's a small part, and there's times throughout the year where they would, I guess, fast from meat,
mm.
and even like on anniversaries of, relatives' deaths and stuff like that, they would. But other than that, I think they would most people would eat meat.
I see.
So yeah, so going back to, I guess, your initial question. So that really urged me to want to, I guess, bring that to the world people. So that sort of got me started on like a food stall, so to speak, and bring veganized versions of all my traditional Vietnamese favorites to people. And yeah, and I spent like months testing it and making sure that it got, my mom's tick of approval, just to make sure that it's got that traditional touch, because there was a lot that was out there, but none of it gave me that warm, fuzzy feeling as you sip into the
Yeah.
spice broth and you slurp down the rice noodles. So yeah, I went and had to create my own. So, and
So
hence,
what were
I
some of the
created my
key
own.
what were some of the key elements that sort of gave you that nice feeling?
I think it was being, around family, and it's also, it's a very, it's something that you do as a family, and
Yeah.
yeah, and it's also that the dish is awesome. It's a warm and very comforting dish. And that's just one example, but I'm sure, if you speak to anyone, they'll have some sort of example, and it just happens to be, associated with a dish that's meat. So then I was like, well, why don't we just create a new experience of a veganized version of that? And then so we started doing that, through the trials of this dish that I wanted to get out there. We got family over and I would cook up for them, and then we would try this dish, and they would give me their feedback until we perfected it. And it took a good 6 months or so of cooking every, once or twice a week, like a big cook up, to be able to get that right. And I'm proud that we got there. And when it all happened, the feedback was very positive. And yeah, so that continued on for a few years. And then I guess the plan was to open up like a restaurant. But then I guess there was sort of a point in time where it's like, do I go all in, or
Right.
do I sort of sit back and then see what else is out there?
Yeah.
And
And I
and
like
it's
the
hard in
approach.
hospitality.
Yeah, I like your approach too. And I like how you shared this particularly with your family. I know that sometimes with they're not necessarily restrictions, but you know what I mean with these principles. Not everyone eats this way. And so sometimes it can be lonesome for a lot of Ammonites, I'm sure. I recently had the privilege to share a meal with a good friend of mine, a world-renowned martial artist. And just, something about it. It's like what you were saying, being able to share your meal with someone at a certain time of the day. It's very, something about it made caloric restriction way easier too. Um, I
Mm-hmm.
guess just the association of having good company and sharing a meal is something very, very sacred and very beautiful. So being able to include the meditative element, even, with that, is something that gave me just overwhelming joy, and I was able to be more disciplined in that sense.
Yeah, definitely 100%. We should do more of that, and what brings us joy. I don't think we do it enough.
Right, right.
Did you want me to expand on any of that, or you're are
I
you happy with
I know I'm very content. I'm very content, and being an ascetic, I'm also content with moments of space. I I really appreciate that that your wife does so much of this with you. Is that right?
correct? Yeah.
That's great.
We yeah, I guess that's something I seldom speak about, is I guess my sort of support system and my network, you know, being one of the main players is my wife, is that we pretty much do everything together. And I feel like that's similar to Amin Ra, and I guess he's sort of the spokesperson. And but then I guess through speaking to him, I know that his wife does a lot behind the scenes as well. And I guess like that's something that I guess I want to bring some attention to now that you mention it,
Yeah.
and that it's important to have that support network and that system and people that I guess that come along the same journey as well, because it just makes it a bit more fruitful, enjoyable, so to speak, like for such an aesthetic practice.
Right, definitely. Now, did she know anything about it when you first started practicing, or was it like, "Hey, honey, I'm home. I've got this." I'm interested in doing this thing. Was it incremental? It probably was incremental. Was it incremental for you? And you just sort of showed her the video, and hey, this muscle up guy, he does some interesting things that I want to practice.
She's actually never seen the video,
Oh,
so it was more so just like, hey, idea, I have this thing that I want to do. And it was definitely very progressive, even for me as well, because a lot of people ask me, if I want to start eating one meal a day, like how do I best do it? And I just say, just take
yeah.
your time, progressive, like there's no rush. If you want to do this for a lifetime, then accept that you will fail from time to time, accept that there'll be a lot of learnings. And for my wife, she was never initially, I guess, on board, so to speak. But I guess over time, through being the example, through practicing myself, she saw, hang on a minute, like this guy is getting his protein and he's all right.
Yeah.
So then I guess sort of build some faith, some confidence. And then over time, like at the start, it was like a bit frustrating because it sort of took a bit of coercion, if you want to call it that, because I said, this is good for you. Why don't you do it? Why do you forget to take your amino elixir before you eat? Or,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And then it was frustrating, but I guess after a while, it was just more so just like, okay, I know this is good for me. And I know that, you are, I guess you're thriving. So then let me do this and let me do this with you. And then, so yes, it sort of became a progressive thing. And over time, it just through, I guess, adopting the systems that I've sort of laid out in my practices, it just became like an effortless practice.
Yeah. And what was your athletic background before the protocol?
I've always been active in school. Always involved in all different types of sports, like sports that I didn't even know I would be any good at, but just gave a bash at
Like
anyway.
kickboxing, for
So
example.
like swimming, athletics, cross country, soccer, and I think I won the school's like sports championship like 2 years in a row. And yeah, so just all types of sports. And then so soccer being the main thing. Then after I got injured from that, I got into kickboxing, martial arts for 7 or 8 years or so, before sort of ceasing that and then sort of just getting into my own sort of personal training.
The spinning back fist being your favorite.
Yes. I don't even know how you know that.
I don't either. I just remember it from somewhere. Excellent, excellent. And so before and after, so you've always, give or take, been athletic. You've been involved in sports and these sorts of things. I'm sure that there was not a lag phase, but a discovery phase when you first started the protocol, in a sense where, because it took time to, intellectual time to like measure out the calories and to focus on this, maybe doing sports less for a while you slowly, incrementally sort of leaned into this, or was it just fast for you?
Um, yeah, it's all, you know, to really reflect, it's all like a blend. It's all a blur. But if I was to really pinpoint it back, I think, you know, there was an adaptation phase where perhaps like, you know, my body was not used to training at the end of the day when you're low on fuel, the fuel that most people would, I guess, fuel the body with, you know, being glucose and glycogen. So yeah, but now it's like I thrive on that. Like, and if I couldn't even imagine eating and then going working out, because it just feels so unnatural to me now. And
Yeah.
I feel very light, very nimble, and very powerful, I guess,
During
in
the
a
day.
fasted state towards the end of the day. And, you know, and my wife, like, hats off to her. She practiced the same. Like, she'll have a soccer game this afternoon,
Mm.
and then I guess beyond what a lot of people on her team would even believe or know is that she plays that full 90 minutes totally fasted. And whereas they were, you know, having the breakfast and eating their oranges and the lollies in between, trying to refuel the body. And there she is, like, being the
Yeah.
fittest on the team,
Yes.
and haven't not eaten anything
Yeah.
besides her dinner from the night before.
Wow.
So
And does she
it
take in
just
any nutraceuticals when she's playing or anything like this?
Um, I'll prepare a little concoction for her.
Turmeric, maybe?
So, hey,
Turmeric, maybe?
no, not quite yet, because I think turmeric and curcumin in those likes will
Mm.
sort of will I guess increase autophagy and anti-inflammatory properties, which I think will be beneficial after her game. But prior to that, we just want, I guess, sort of cognitively and her
Mhm.
nervous systems to be firing. So stuff like L-carnitine, um, some salt, even potassium, magnesium, so very electrolyte heavy, and even coffee and some theanine
Excellent. I
is
like
a
the
great
inclusion
is a
of
great combo.
L-theanine as well.
Yeah, yeah,
L-theanine, uh, that has a relationship to alpha waves, yes?
correct. Yes.
That's wonderful. For the first time, and you know this a little bit about me because our last time we talked, for a while I wasn't able to have caffeine. About a week or two ago was my first time having caffeine, and I was almost stunned. I was like, I just looked around. I'm like, no one
Congratulations.
told me this is how this feels. Like, this is amazing. You guys are cheating. But I like that
So
my
what spurred you to have caffeine again, or coffee? And has it been positive so much so that you will continue with it, or have you digressed?
it's been a beautiful experiment because you know, it's sort of like incremental, knowing when to lean off, knowing when to lean in, and knowing which sources of caffeine and how much and at what times during the day. And but what I have noticed is the metabolism difference. I did become leaner because I've already been practicing caloric restriction, and so that is a beautiful part for me because the leaner the better, as far as I'm concerned. I love the aesthetics to it. In regard to how it feels, particularly love green tea. I've been having black tea. That was my first one. The first thing that I had was black tea. And it's Earl Grey. So it also had bergamot peel in it, which is probably really good because it helps soothe the nervous system, which was some of the issues that I was having, particularly around the brain. The nerves around my brain were just hypersensitive and they were overreactive. So, and this is because of my hallucinogen abuse. So, you know, over time, being able to heal that and coming back to it and using the asanas, for example, to sort of rebuild my nervous system from the ground up, and being able, sort of developing a good sense for where my nerves were at different parts of the day and how sunlight affected it and all these other small things, and being able to update the output over time. So I started with a small amount of caffeine, and I just dipped it into into water for like 2 seconds. Like that's how sensitive I am, for like 2 seconds, and then took it out. And then even then it was like, oh, this is could become, but I stretched, hatha yoga, because it's all associated to the nervous system. And then also thanks to my
Mhm.
meditation practice, and because I've sort of had to do a lot of this the hard way, I'm pretty good at being able to concentrate and move my nervous system energy to different parts of my body, which is very useful during some of the effects that you've also experienced with me, and apparently no one else, with regard to sometimes that hypersensitivity to insulin, um, and how the muscles feel. It's like that, but it was happening in my brain. And so I just had
Wow.
this strong, rigorous feeling of wanting to move and massage my muscles and move that out in my brain. Um, and I'm really thankful that it's balanced out enough now. So I've been having caffeine every day and since I've been able to, and it's been really beautiful, I'll say, because now it's like, learning how to manage that. I feel so much efficient during my fast, as long as that, because it's such a benefit, not just on, inflammatory proteins, but also the many amino acids that are available inside of something like green tea, really helps balance me out. It was just the caffeine element that I needed to get
Mhm.
around. So now that the caffeine element is around, I'm able to benefit from all these other amino acids, like the L-theanine, just as one example. And because of that, it's heightened my meditation practice. So I just feel much more efficient and coherent. Um, yeah,
That's awesome. Congratulations. I'm glad that caffeine is now part of your practice and your protocol.
me
It's
too.
definitely a very beneficial compound, and it was actually, for anyone, I would say, highly rate as one of the the most high source of antioxidants and nootropics compound that we could take as modern man for the average person,
Mm, mm.
and pair that with theanine. Like that's, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
When I discovered that,
Yeah,
it was incredible. It was my mind was blown in terms of the benefits of theanine, and when you pair it with coffee, it's like this. They would, some people would describe it as like the limitless pill, but I wouldn't go as far as that.
right.
But get some quality theanine, some quality coffee, mix it together, have it during prior to like a cognitively intensive task, and just watch yourself go. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I use it very strategically from time to time, and then that really allows me to appreciate and really make the most out of the compound.
Some of what's happening here is obviously flow state is associated to this. That's the direct part. Whereas you have certain neurochemicals, which when they're combined inside of the body, it puts us in flow. And flow is simply when the nervous system or different parts of the nervous system are able to align and synchronize in a way where everything feels very fluid. So this sounds like a little bit about what you're saying. There's also something interesting here too, which is when it comes to alpha waves, people who have addictive tendencies, like I had for a long time, or people who smoke cannabis, for example, what happens is, and I recently was listening to a beautiful lecture by Dr. Shiva Ayadurai, which he's been teaching me the systems-based approach, and I've been getting certified in this. Essentially, we aren't taught how to understand things in a sense of systems, how everything operates with the system. So with all systems, it operates the same way. You have an input, which is karma, because the Indians have known this for thousands of years. So we can go back and forth in the terminology as well between English engineering terminology and Indian philosophy. So there's karma, which you people are very familiar with this word, karma, which means action or input. Input comes into the structure, which is known as kapha. Kapha is known as water and earth, and it works in combination with pitta, also meaning process or metabolism. So it goes into the structure, the input goes into the structure, my body, like food, for example. So we've been taught the systems-based approach by the doctor inadvertently through intuition. So I really like this. We take in food, which is input or karma, information, data, action, comes into our kaphos, water and earth. It's metabolized, particularly when we take in our AEA3 in the morning or go for the persistence walk. That's the pitta or the fire element. And then there's also transport, which is vata, which means air or space, which also works on a psychological level by giving ourselves space in between point A and point B and point C. So space is very important, even cognitively on the meditative ascetic element as well. And then it's transported from the pitta kapha relationship out into the output. And what's beautiful here, and I'm getting a flashback of our nocturnal meditation, so to speak, and how important I'm starting to believe it is on the engineering perspective, is at the output, and this is what happens with a lot of people when they're using drugs, at the output, with an intelligent system, and AI is also designed this way, as well as all systems are designed this way. If it's intelligent, most systems would just have those 3-4 parts or 5 elements. But then there's these extra 3 parts that would happen if it's intelligent system. So what would happen is at the output, you would have something called indriyas, which are known as senses, that would senses like smell, hearing, touch, etc. But we also have layers of senses as well, like psychic senses, which pick up on subtle things. This is intuition, where we would pick up on nikaras, which are known as disruptions. So this is also part of life. Disruptions happen. And this is what I like what you were saying, how, not to take things so strictly, but to allow ourselves to make mistakes and simply to update it after it's happened. If we don't allow ourselves to make mistakes, we don't actually learn efficiently. And we've learned this over time. And so right around the stage, we'll see disturbances or changes, like life comes in with certain feedbacks, changes, we process them through our senses, and then we update back at the input using our manas or mind, which is this full system. So the system is set up that way, but we ourselves also operate as mechanisms. And what I find with a lot of people who are using substances, myself included at the time, was that we're disrupting ourselves from sensing the nikaras. We're disrupting our ability to sense the output. And so it's stopping the machine before it's able to come full circle and re-regulate itself. Mm-hmm. And so with certain substances, food as well, of course, because people use food and alcohol in a very similar way, whereas they're using it to cease the senses or to dull the senses, because we actually know that neurologically this is what happens. And during a fast, the very opposite is happening. Our nervous systems are very much heightened during the fast. And so we're naturally, whether we're aware of it or not, much more able to pick up on disturbances than the average person would be who's consuming more than 1 meal a day. And so one of the things that seems to be happening as well is if we're taking something like cannabis, for example, or smoking, it has a negative effect in this way, whereas it inhibits and slows down, and we'll bring this back around to L-theanine. It inhibits or slows down alpha, theta, and gamma wave activity. And so this is sort of the relationship between the real yogi and the fake yogi, where the real yogi takes his cannabis, he has a moment of enlightenment, he has a moment of advanced alpha state. But then it's similar to how steroids would work, whereas now you're taxing that part of the system and it's not able to conduce this on its own. And so what we're doing is obviously different. And so meditation itself has direct relationship to increasing alpha, gamma, and theta waves. And they each play a role in synchronizing the whole system, the machinery that we are and operate as. Something like green tea has L-theanine in it, and it also has GABA in it. And they found that by supplementing GABA, that we're able to restore theta waves in particular, but other waves as well. We're able to restore those theta waves that were theta oscillations that were inhibited and left to ruin by our use of over abuse of cannabis. And I had used cannabis quite abusively for a while after my nervous system was just hyper excited all the time. So with abusing certain hallucinogens, it put me in a place where my body just didn't know how to slow down. My myelin sheath was destroyed. And so constantly sending electrical signals in places where they would normally meant to be ordered. And you can imagine all sorts of experiences that I was happening, because the nervous system has a direct relationship to the neurotransmitters, and neurotransmitters is what we experience with mystical experiences, but very ungrounded and incredibly uncomfortable. But that helped me develop my asceticism as well, because I had no choice but to learn these subtleties about the mechanics of how the regimen works. So it's almost like I was forced to adhere to what he was saying and mimic everything that he did before I could understand it. Because even my brain to process, to read what he was doing, I just couldn't do it. And I had so many also learning things to unlearn, so to speak, so many programs running, reductionist approaches to learning that I had to do away with while learning his system, and sort of lean more into my intuition over time as well, which has been very valuable to me. And so through learning his system, I've been able to intuitively pick up on the systems-based approach, which includes these 5 elements that we just discussed, which is the input, the vata, the input being karma, the output, the input being karma, the kapha being our structure, the pitta being our metabolism, and the output being our karma phal. And, people often talk about that word. They say what goes around comes around when it comes to karma, and your actions dictate your destiny. And that's very much the case. And what seems really appropriate here when it comes to the regimen, and I did want to bring this up, I just intuitively had it in my mind and I wrote it. The goal matters. And what I love about the ascetic system that Nun has put forward in particular is the goal is connected to the output, in a sense where, let me see if I can even particularly remember the way that I phrased it. The goal is essentially mastery, but it's done through asceticism. What is asceticism? Asceticism is development through discipline, spiritual development through discipline. And so the goal is associated to what we would do to sense the outputs and bring it back full circle. And that's what sort of separates this and makes it very coherent compared to other religious systems. And I'll call it a religious system because by definition, that is what it is. It definitely isn't a diet. Would you agree?
I definitely wouldn't say it's a diet, even though I guess that's what people categorize it as or see it as, but it's definitely, once you dive deep, it's a whole encompassing lifestyle. And I think that's how the architect intended it to be. So I guess just by seeing it that way, you're already honoring his wishes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gratifies me to feel connected to the underlying principles. I'm sure to his own extent, he has so much self-confidence in himself, he doesn't care. But for my own life, I've definitely that's completely okay with me, just because of how, the feedback that I've gotten, the input, right, the karma that I've gotten, and the goal change that I've gotten. Because we live in a society right now where very few amount of people are trying to change our goals. And how do they do that? In my opinion, in my perspective, it seems like by disrupting our senses, by dulling our senses. There's leaving an opening in between the part that is the input, which is the karma, and the what would you say? The mind, another word for the mind is the head honcho, or the head. There's a specific word that starts with a C that I was enjoying to use earlier. It's not controller. I guess it's the part of us that's able to update decisions. And so there's a part where because our senses themselves are being dulled by excess food and the types of food that are being chosen and distributed and the information, it's sort of put people in a position to run a certain program because their goal has been swapped out by another one. And the only way, if we have a good goal, the only way that can be done is by dulling our keen senses as they exist. So what's beautiful about the architecton's work, I suppose, is simply by making us more conscious of our nervous system, simply by raising the sharpness of our senses. That is the solution. The solution is consciousness. The solution, and this is what I like about, the simplicity of it too, is enlightened asceticism. That's what it means. It's enlightenment in the sense where we can see the system. We can enlightened in a sense where it's illuminated. It's very straightforward, operates through these simple principles. It's very mechanistic. It's a system, and he does call it a system under that context. And I'm really appreciating that I'm able to explain that for the first time recently, thanks to another doctor named ironically, Dr. Shiva.
Yeah, that's great. Definitely, it's a system, and once you see it that way, it really takes the stress out of, I guess, trying to perfect all the micros,
Mm,
and see that it's a learning journey, it's a whole system and things like that. And I once upon a time thought that it's a journey with the destination and that I've arrived. But then that was a big mistake because there is no arriving. And when I sort of got out of that mindset and know that it's a constant, ongoing, evolving journey, then it just becomes like so much more
yeah,
fruitful, and you just open up a whole new world if you do that, or else you're just really restricting yourself to what you know and what you know only. And I guess that's sort of what introduced me into, I guess, Amun Ra's work, because as ridiculous as it may seem for any first people that firstly come across this, is that if you're open to the concept and that you understand the science, because the science is very important as well. And I guess then after that, then you get into the practicability of the I guess the regimen. Then you add on that, on top of that, your own personal experience. Then I guess you really truly understand and appreciate, I guess, the amount of work that's gone behind all this. And yeah, and I guess it really takes, for you to be patient, to take a deep dive yourself, and don't expect all the answers to come right away, and enjoy the process, because there's no rushing to find that answer right away. But yeah, so for me, it's been a constant journey, and I'm still experimenting, and implementing micro changes from time to time, and seeing what the effects that it has on me. But I'm really grateful that for the majority of the part, I've got things really dialed in. So any micro changes that I make, it's very noticeable. And it took time, and it took a lot of work. But if you don't put in the time and the work and you expect answers, and not to hate on anyone, but there's a lot of people that sort of reach out to me and expect quick answers and stuff like that. And it's, as much as I want to entertain their question,
sure.
but I know that it's going to be short-lived, because it's
Experience is
not
the
just
answer.
correct.
Yeah, I
uh,
really
I,
like, I really like that you were saying, particularly like how there is no destination, but how that is the destination, right, in an indirect way, by realizing that this is about the human machine and that we have a short time here, and that what we're doing is simplifying it so that way we can actually live our lives. And that's what I like about your approach a lot, is that you naturally have that intuition, and that, you know, you've sort of been a ripe specimen, so to speak, for the Amen protocol in many ways. And you know, I've looked up to and really admired your direction, and learned so many things, because our styles are different, and learned so many things from the way that you practice. I So I wanted to keep this at about an hour, and I think that this is a perfect time to close, if you're up to that.
100%. I very been very grateful to contribute what I could to this call, and grateful for you for your questioning, and also I guess for holding this space.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having this with me. I'm really you know, I was excited before the call, and very excited throughout this call, to be talking to you. And I knew that we would have good alchemy with the call. And you know, with different people, there are different alchemies, because we're different cauldrons, we're different soups, so to speak. So I really appreciate this call, and I hope that we can have one again soon.
No worries, brother. It's been my pleasure, and thank you.
Good, good. Enjoy your day, brother.
Thank you. You too, brother.